A week or two ago, the British magazine Rock Sound announced that they were putting together a tribute album for 21 Pilots' Blurryface as part of the 10-year anniversary celebrations for that album. The tribute album is entitled Blurryface Reborn and features a total of 14 artists, each of which cover one song off of the original album. A few days after releasing the CD for this album, bundled with a magazine for pre-order, Rock Sound released a couple of segments from each of these 14 songs, so we could get a taste of what to expect from the album itself. Having listened through these several times, here are my initial thoughts and rankings of these songs. Obviously, all we got were small, I think 30-second segments of each one, so it's hard to judge the entire song based purely off of that. But you can sort of form a prediction of where you think this song would rank in comparison to the others, and also what I'm excited or apprehensive about in terms of the final finished product when we finally get to hear that. This isn't a song ranking or tier list or anything like that, more of a preemptive review ending with a final prediction for which 5 songs off of this collection I think will end up being my favorite covers of the album. Now I should add as a disclaimer before we go any further that generally speaking, the overall style of these covers is not necessarily my thing, my cup of tea. And I may dislike the sound of some of these songs based purely off of that, while for other people, they consider them to be very great covers. But I do think, for instance, this first cover by Bambi Thug of Heavy Dirty Soul is one of my least favorites that I heard off of this collection, because the sound of it, the style of this music, is not something that I would normally listen to. And since Heavy Dirty Soul is one of my favorite songs off of the album, I think I naturally would rank this one much lower. And unfortunately, because of that, I'm not sure I really have much more to say other than this is just not a song or a version of this song which I think I would listen to beyond the first initial listen when this album does actually get released. Stressed Out, on the other hand, is one which I quite liked the sound of. I'm not sure if it's pronounced AWOL Nation or Owl Nation, but I think I've heard other pieces by this guy, group, band, artist, and I quite liked the sound of this one. I think I'll have to hear the full song to know for sure if I like it, but overall, this was one of my favorites. I think, yeah, it's just, I've always enjoyed hearing different versions of Stressed Out. I think it's a song which really lends itself to reimaginings, and strangely is not a song which 21 Pilots have themselves reimagined all that much, although they do that with plenty of their other songs. So I did really like the sound of this one. Some people have commented that his voice sounds a little strange. I think I agree, but I don't think it's bad. Yes, maybe the vocals could be slightly better on this one, but I didn't think it was terrible, and I'm excited to hear the rest of that. There were also certain parts of the instrumentation, I think kind of in between the verse and the chorus here, where it slows down in preparation for the chorus, that reminded me of sort of a moment of melody in Ned's Cozy Fireplace remixes. Then the song continues and it stops sounding like that, but I just thought that was interesting, and I enjoyed that it was similar, although I have no expectation that that was in any way intentional. I think it was just cool to hear. This cover of Ride by Arrows in Action is good, but one which I would probably place lower, and it's not one which I'm as excited to hear the rest of, mainly because it doesn't sound all that different from the original. Obviously, I and many others hadn't heard of most of the artists covering these songs, but really what I was excited for and looking for in a tribute album of covers to Blurryface is hearing new, interesting reimaginings of these songs, which have become classic 21 Pilots songs in many ways because of the nature of what that album is for the band. Especially a song like Ride, which is one of their top 3 songs. It might even be their second best performing song. I'm not sure if it's Stressed Out, or I'm not sure if it's Heathens or Ride at this point, because I know there was a flip, I think, at some point. But just in terms of streaming numbers, it's like Stressed Out, Heathens, and Ride are top 3 best performing songs by 21 Pilots. So I was hoping that a cover of this song would be a bit more unique. And what Arrows in Action did with the performance, I think, is good. I think it sounds well performed. Nothing really wrong with it, but it was just too similar to what we already heard with the original song, and it would have been cool to see a new version of the song, a new reimagining, a new sound and style on this song in particular. The next song, Fairly Local by James Marriott, did do this quite well. There is a very particular sound and style which the original version of Fairly Local has, and it is one of my favorite songs off of Blurryface, but I really like what he did with the rhythm and the pacing and the sound and style of this cover of Fairly Local. I'm very excited to hear the rest of this. I really like the direction that it's going. I'm not sure entirely how I feel about his voice yet. I don't know, the style of it hits my ear a little strangely, but also, again, it's really hard when we're, listening to a 6-minute compilation of 14 snippets of songs. Jumping between those different vocal styles is always a little jarring. So perhaps it is just that. Perhaps that was my takeaway simply because of how it jumped from one vocal style to the next, and his sounded a little odd after Arrows in Action or something like that. So that may change once I hear the full song. Next up, we have a cover of Tear in My Heart by Aviva. Now, as I'm sure many of you already know, this song in particular is not one of my favorites, but I thought this cover version was actually quite decent, especially considering it isn't a song which is normally my cup of tea, and this still is one which I would rank lower and is not one which I am as impressed by, let's say, as some of the others, but I do think it turned out quite well. I know Rock Sound mentioned that some of these artists were even inspired to start their bands or their music groups by 21 Pilots. They're inspired to do that by 21 Pilots. And I am curious if this artist is one of those, just given the red eyeshadow and things like that. Perhaps there's an influence or a connection there from, the red eyeshadow that we saw on Josh in Blurryface and then this artist here. Or perhaps that was just something which he did as part of this Blurryface celebration. I'm not sure. I know absolutely nothing about her. The song Lane Boy was covered by a group called Yonaka and renamed to Lane Girl. Now, this one I have some mixed feelings about, because the original sound and instruments and so on that was used in Lane Boy, not just the melody, but the actual sound of, I think it must have been a synthesizer or something that they used in that song, I really like. I really like how that was performed on the original album. And this one, this version of it sounds a little too generic, a little too kind of mainstream rock for my taste. And I also thought that there was a marked lack of instrumentation, that most of what we heard, at least in this snippet, was carried by the singer's vocals rather than any kind of backing instrumentation as well. Which again, that's fine. To have the vocal melody carry the tune of the song. But that is a departure from what I really liked about Lane Boy itself. The lyrics of Lane Boy are great, but the melody and sound were one of the things which I really liked about the original version of that song. That said, I do think the vocals on this cover are really good. They do reimagine the song and bring a new style of melody to this song. Compared to the original. So I do like that, and I'm glad that they did that. Because, like I said, some of the other covers were a little too close to the original, and I appreciate seeing the kind of original creativity that they were bringing to that song. Noah Finnis covered The Judge, and this one, again, is hard, because The Judge, just like Heavy Dirty Soul, is one of my favorites off of the album. So it's hard to hear something that's a little different or drastically different from the original and to like it as much and therefore not instantly dislike it. And I definitely am not a fan of the vocal performance by this artist on the song. It sounds, I'm sure it's just his style and that's fine, but it sounds a little too sarcastic for my liking, especially for a song as powerful and deep and meaningful as The Judge, to kind of have that sarcastic tone to the singing, which can work well on some genres of music and some particular songs, but I don't think it really fit what this song was about. But the music behind the vocals was fine. Overall, it was an okay performance here. But I am a little apprehensive, perhaps, about the full version of the song. I don't think it's one which I'm going to like very much. Now, some people seemed to already be aware of this group called Royal and the Serpent. It's not one which I had heard of in the past, but they cover the song Doubt, which obviously has been getting a bit more attention lately because of the demo version of Doubt going viral on TikTok. And then obviously, they released the version officially on Spotify and so on. In terms of this cover, this version of the song, I would say I'm intrigued and I want to hear more. Overall, generally not a fan of certain choices that we hear them making, but I do think the vocals are pretty good, and that performance is pretty good. But the way in which it slows down for the repeating doubt part, I don't think worked as well. It felt a little awkward, but we'll see when the full version is released. It's not near the top of my list, but it's kind of mid-range. I think I am very curious to see how that fits in with the song as a whole, because I think this is one which is hard to judge based just off of that snippet. Next up is Polarize, which was covered by a group called Dead Pony. This one, in my mind, didn't really work. They repaced the lyrics in kind of a weird way. The performance is technically proficient, I would say, but the style in which they perform the song is not really my thing. I think they kind of, I don't know, something felt a little off and a little awkward and perhaps a little forced about how they, I think, just repaced it simply. It was just a little odd. Polarize has always been kind of a mid-level song for me off of Blurryface. I appreciate it when I hear it, but it's not one that I actually go and seek out to listen to all that much. But in general, overall, I don't think I was as big of a fan of this particular cover of the song. While I did say that I, hoped for reimaginings of these songs, and that is still the case, I'm not sure that this particular reimagining of the pacing of the lyrics and things like that really worked well. I want cover artists of this album to reimagine the songs and bring them into their own style and do something unique with them, but that also should be done well, and I'm not sure that I found this particular cover to be done well. But perhaps I'm being a little too harsh in my judgment there. In similar fashion to the cover of Ride by Arrows in Action, I found this cover of We Don't Believe What's on TV by Bears and Trees to be a little too similar to the original. However, that said, I did think that they improved on the vocal performance over the original, or at least it gave it a unique spin. They did some interesting harmonizing, I believe, with the vocals here, and that probably was due to having a 4-piece band and having two different singers able to kind of contribute to the vocals for the chorus and things like that. I am curious to hear the rest of this. I'm also curious to hear kind of how it is in length, because that song, at least on the original version of that song, is a very fast-paced kind of short song. And this one felt like it might be slightly slower paced, so I'm curious to see if they kind of make it a longer song because of that, or if it stays roughly the same. Obviously, it wasn't drastically different. They didn't make it a very drawn-out, slow melody, per se, but it did seem slightly slower than it had been on the original album. So overall, not bad for this one. I think I'm intrigued. I want to hear more. Track 11, Message Man, is certainly one of my favorites off of the album, and one which I have returned to the most as time's gone on, certainly more than some classic songs off of Blurryface, like Stressed Out and Ride. Message Man, I think, is one which is somewhat underrated and is a fantastic song, and I was not terribly impressed by this cover. Again, the lyrics in Message Man are great, but the melody is one of the parts which was my favorite about that song, the way the organ plays and so on. And I think, again, it's good to reimagine the song. But again, the way they did it here is kind of a bland, sort of mainstream sounding rock song that it didn't really add much kind of heart to the song. It didn't, like, there's a particular mood and tone that the original version of the song has, and they kind of missed that with this. In similar fashion, the cover of Hometown by RTO also misses the point in the tone of that song. Now, I do think that this one is slightly better, but in many ways it just sounded like something that you would hear playing in the waiting lobby of a Black Ops 3 game, and maybe for some people that means it's fantastic, and that's very exciting, but it isn't really my thing. The Red Jumpsuit Apparatus did a cover of Not Today. Now, I must confess, the original version of the song, the one on Blurryface, is one of my least favorite songs off of the album. But I did like this, and I'm excited to hear more of it and hear the full version when it comes out. Perhaps if I really like that, I'll check out some other songs by this particular artist as well. And then finally, we have a cover of Goner by a group called As It Is. And this one was quite good. I'm curious to hear the full version. I think it's a little hard to say for sure what my takeaway was from this one. Generally positive, but again, I want to hear the full version of this one. Goner is a hard song to cover, I'm sure. So overall, I think they did a decent job, but we'll see. Again, this wasn't necessarily a tier list or a ranking of these songs per se, but the top 5 covers, just based off of these snippets that I had at the end, were as follows: Stressed Out, Fairly Local, Lane Girl, Not Today, and Goner. As I mentioned, I'm excited to hear the full versions of these when they do finally release. I'm curious to hear what they all sound like together, played out throughout an entire album, rather than a bunch of random snippets cut up and thrown together without the best transitions, let's say. With that being said, thank you for watching. Be sure to comment below which your favorite cover was, or which one you are most excited to hear the full version of when the album finally releases. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.